26, page 10, that STRs bring not only guests but future residents. Kerry Henderson's story was that he came here and helped start the Festival of the Voice, and a lot of art and culture was brought here because of people that came here and that.
I think we're trying to get that out of the town.
And the last point is jobs. A lot of people refer to in different comments about jobs. And I think when I came here, I looked for work, and it's really hard to find any kind of work around here. And so STRs, if you, let's just say there's 700, I don't think we're anywhere near that, but think of how many, a lot of people are employed because of STRs. There's construction, the businesses can hire waiters and waitresses and stuff. But one thing I really want to talk about is this idea that STRs, it's STR's fault that there's no long-term rentals. That's such a crop. There may be a few, let's say if the problem was 100%, STRs might be 2 or 3% of that problem. The problem is not, if I buy a property, I'm not going to rent it out long-term, because when am I going to come up in the summer to stay here? When am I going to come up on a weekend? I can't come up to a place that's rented out long-term, right?
No, the point is it'll be occupied.
I agree that the second homeowner isn't going to make their rental a short-term, a long-term rental. But I know, and I don't get out much, but I know firsthand of someone who was lost their long-term apartment because they were turning it into a short-term rental.
I'm sure there's more than one.
Well,
again, I think
and I think your percentages are maybe right that it's relatively low, but I think the percentage of long-term rentals available to begin with are low.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
it's a big impact if you lose one.
when I look at some of the county numbers, I think in the last like 5 or 10 years, the long-term rentals changed like by about 5 or 6 in Shandaken. That's very, so everyone
5 or
counts.
6 units or 5 or 6%?
5 or 6 rentals. It changed with, I forget the exact number of years, but I couldn't believe how low it was. One of the things I was thinking of, when people register to do their STR, which I think everybody should do, I think we should think about what kind of survey or information that would help us get a better understanding of issues like that. And so we can more specifically quantify the impact on long-term housing, on long-term rentals. So we know, because right now we don't know. We don't know how many people are buying properties and only renting them out. There's a lot that we don't know. And we have an opportunity, if people register, to have them fill out certain, check certain boxes in their STR, so that we can then get a better understanding as a town to what those numbers are, so we can then talk to it, manage it, and maybe change and evolve the structure in such a way that we can address long-term rentals.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I hit a lot on the same points that a lot of you are already making. And this is coming strictly from the comments, because I thought that's what we were doing.
Yeah.
There seem to be a lot of comments commenting either way on loss of community, whether there seems to be a lot saying, I like having a neighbor when normally there wouldn't be a neighbor there. And then a lot of people saying, and if we're doing opinions, living in Pine Hill, there is a loss of community 5 out of 7 days a week. Quality of life, which I like the way that Sam put it, using that phrase. That's kind of how this whole thing started. If we go back a year and a half, it was people coming to town board meetings and complaining about transient neighbors. So that kind of jumped out at me looking as a theme through the comments. And then whether there's a correlation or not, there are a couple of comments about housing. And if any of you were at the Pat Ryan town hall meeting last month, the month before, there was an impassioned couple who their main deal was that they had been living in a short-term rental for a year and renting it off and on because they couldn't find a home. So they were moving between a parent's house and a short-term rental.
And 2 employed people.
And they were both employed in Phoenicia. One was an engineer and he couldn't find a house. And as that goes, I can tell you 3 couples my age that have had to leave town in the past 5 months. So it just jumped out at me in the comments that there were quite a few of those. Whether there's a correlation or not, I'm not really sure.
I really think it's important that we learn more about that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
My pen tells me the meeting's over. Does anybody have a spare? Thanks.
I found one at the last minute. Don't be going without it, right?
Or with two, I guess, or three maybe. No, that one does, yeah.
All right, so, you know, I was trying to distill, and three things that jump out to me the most are, first of all, economic benefit to the town. It was the most commented on thing in the survey, and there was both positive and negative comments, but by and large, I think the positive comments far outweighed the negative comments about economic benefit to the town. The second was community character, and as already been said, that cut both ways. There were some pretty cogent arguments about how my community character is being impugned, and there were other arguments about, like what James is saying, hey, we got some neighbors and everybody's really nice and so on. I've heard it both ways. I mean, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, people come, they stay in my bedroom, they're in my living room, we're watching TV together. I've never had a negative experience. And then there are other people who, you know, the dog is pooping in the yard, they're really outraged. So that cuts both ways. But community character, I thought, was another major concern of the community. And the other thing was safety. And those, parenthetically, those are the three things that I went in here thinking, you know, even before the survey, that I thought would be the most important. A couple of things I want to say is, lack of one, well, first of all, determining the legality is going to be absolutely essential. We're going to, you know, if that means changing the zoning laws, I mean, that means taking it to the planning board, that means a 6-month town board, that means a 6-month process. That's really complicated. And like Sam says, you know, that's what we're going to recommend. We're really going to have to, you know, be crystal clear and nail this down and be totally transparent. And the other thing is lack of long-term rental. You know, I mean, to address James' concerns, I think there's obviously an impact on long-term rental. Whether it's totally squelching long-term rental, no, I don't think so. I think there's just a lack of long-term rental housing. And I think one of the things that's hopefully will come out of this committee is a solution or a direction or a way forward on the long-term rental, and it looks more and more to me like some kind of government subsidized community housing. So that's beyond the purview of, I think, this committee, right? Unless you have a secret stash of government money.
But it seems to me that, to build on what you're saying, let's say we got a number of millions of dollars coming into the town, we're creating jobs and stuff like that. So let's say you cut that in half, and you created two more long-term rentals. So two people who work as waiters and waitresses at Brio's can live here and work here. So two people who probably spend most of the money out of town would benefit, and we squelch half of the STR rentals in the town. Obviously, I'm exaggerating to make a point.
Here's speculation. I'm exaggerating much more.
I'm exaggerating to make a point, but my point in the equation is the total number of revenue and economic benefit to the town and jobs is, if you regulate it and regulate it and regulate it, the overall positive impact you're gonna have on long-term housing is really gonna be minimal in terms of return to the community, in terms of character to the community, in terms of money to the community, in terms of jobs to the community. It's not, you don't regulate STRs to increase long-term housing. You regulate STRs for other reasons like safety,
Yes.
and like things like that. Those are the reasons to regulate them. Safety of the guests.
I agree. Can I weigh in on this? Because the reason why we went number one, property rights, is that because we have a business in Woodstock, and I talked to people like Mike Castiglione in Woodstock and how they were putting together their rules. We live here, and you know, you read between the lines, and I'm just being very blunt. It's like, let's keep Shandaken shabby because that makes it affordable. We can't solve the long-term renting problem by taking away from the individual property owner a right that they may have to do what they want with their home. That's why I think individual property rights are really important, because one, it may not get to where the people want with solving long-term rental, but I think it's fundamentally unfair to people who actually own their homes.
Let me make a serious interjection. You can't do whatever you want with your home.
Yeah.
Can't put it in
And
a
that's
zoning.
why zoning.
Of
That's
course,
what it is zoning,
Yeah.
so.
of course.
So, I mean, that's why we got, like the zoning, and that's why we're having an issue in Woodland Valley.
But let's,
The other-
but a meth lab is very different than saying, I have 3 bedrooms,
Yeah.
I'm occupying 3 bedrooms. Some are occupied by family, some are occupied by people who pay me to be there.
Which-
Very different than an illegal use.
Yeah,
So,
but what is-
you know, I take a little exception, because that was I know rhetorically that was an extreme case you were giving there. But a person has a right to use their home as a home.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
is it
but what about,
a,
what about if suddenly their home becomes a commercial use?
That's where we gotta get to the bottom of legalities. I don't know.
Yeah.
And at what
And-
expense to your neighbor?
That's the community part, I agree.
Okay, so can I ask you a question? So, I have a couple of neighbors who live there full-time. Every summer, he feels his country western music is something that the whole community should enjoy. And he plays his goddamn music really, really loud, endlessly. And if you ask him to turn around, he takes great offense at that. He takes great offense.
Okay.
I have kids who are, most of the trouble in my community, and we have a lot of Airbnbs, because you know where I am, I'm in Woodland Valley. They're not from, I've never had a single problem with any of the renters from, and I've all talked to other hosts in my neighborhood. There's not been a single issue
You're lucky.
that I know the town. And most of the trouble comes from neighbors. All these things about bear nuisance, about garbage and stuff like that, those are all issues that need to be managed. It's part of safety.
Right.
But if you look at the number of incidents of where long-term, where guests cause trouble as a percentage of the total incidents in town, it's really, 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 really small.
Do you know why? They're not here that long.
Who's not here now?
The short-term rental people.
Right, but
People that live here, are here all the time.
hear what all the time?
They're in town, they're in, in the community all the time. Short-term rental people are only here for a day, 2 days.
No, but what I'm saying is the impact, the negative impact on town of all this. Now, if an STR owner lets his neighbors walk on other people's property, and that one comment was, it's not the guests from STRs that walk on my property, it's my neighbor who walks on my property. But I don't think many guests would walk on other people's
Oh, they
property
do.
willy-nilly. I'm sure they do.
Out of ignorance.
I don't, but the point is that to vilify these guests as shooting around and having wild parties, I'm not saying that there's not, some people come up here and have parties. I can talk about parties that are by local people that go till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning too. So if a local person has a party till 3 or 4 in the morning, that's okay. We shouldn't call the
That's
police
why
on
they have
them, but if
police
an SDR has
Call
a
police
party till
department.
2 o'clock in the morning, that's a major problem.
this is
I don't get it.
oddly specific, but I was having a conversation with someone recently, and their argument was that the house next to them is large, and it's Airbnb almost exclusively for parties by younger people. And I said, that doesn't sound so bad. And he said, it wouldn't be bad if it was my neighbor and I felt comfortable going over and having a beer, but instead I have kids that are having a big bonfire and they're up till 3 in the morning. So there is a difference between the local
And
and
it's your
STR.
issue when you say you don't get it. I think what you don't get is people don't, they dislike giving up local control, to your
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
It's local control. This is what I think.
Local control what?
Would you rather go to a house, there's a house party next door and it's an STR. Would you rather go over and be like, hey guys, I'm James. Can I have a beer? No? Okay, see you later. Whereas, I'm not saying that's the thing, but there are people, when my neighbor has a party, I feel comfortable walking over and saying, hey, how's it going? How late are you gonna get? Can I hang out?
It's a relationship, it's a
It's
recurring
a
relationship.
It's a community relationship. that-
Yeah,
that some
and
people feel is
and when
lack.
I went to my neighbor and asked him to turn the music down, I almost got beat up by my friendly neighbor who's there all the time.
Okay, so that's one incident, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so, I mean,
There are certainly some
we have to look
things
at, we
that
have
aren't
to look
gonna
at,
get solved
we have to
here.
look at the bigger picture, is what I'm saying.
Totally agree.
And put it into perspective.
Yeah, but before you look at the bigger picture, you have to look at the zoning and how it affects right now the SDRs in that community. If it is legal or it isn't legal, and I think,
Well-
that's really what we should be discussing. You're more or less discussing everything that has to do with regulating or re-regulating or not doing any regulation with the SDR.
I'm not saying, I've never said that we should not regulate. In fact, I just a little while ago said to Howie, I said, when we register people and have a system, it's, not only should we do that, A, B, we should make sure that we learn more about the SDR's configuration so that we know more about safety, so we know more about community character. And I think every host should have a contact number that can be called. If a neighbor has a complaint or has a concern, there should be a number that they can call, and somebody answers the phone. Not, leaves a message, I'm on Long Island on a boat, I'll be back in a month.
That's one of the problems, because when the incident happens, there's nobody there, and you call somebody, but by the time you get somebody over there,
Right.
it's completely over.
No, you have to have local, I think it's important to have a local contact for everyone.
Well, that's if we get to regulating the industry, doing anything with it.
So-
If we get to that
So we
point, I
need
agree with that.
The STR needs a local responsible
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, I don't think you should be able to run an Airbnb, being anywhere in the USA, and rent to 8 people. 10 people. I mean, 10 people is a lot of people, and if they do something that you don't think they should be doing, who's the neighbor gonna call? You have to be able to call somebody locally. You can call
We
the
were
police.
proposing in the committee earlier that, this is the previous committee, that there would be 2 people allowed for every bedroom and 2 people allowed for every parking space. I think those are reasonable. And then we're not considering 2 adults with 3 kids. We're considering, 2 adults and their children, and 2 adults and their children.
That's most common in all these other regs of all these other cities I've
So
been reading.
2
But that's-
adults per bedroom.
And 1 parking space per bedroom.
Well, that's an issue for future discussions. Does everybody agree that the most important issue in front of this discussion is that we have to figure out the legality?
I think it's so important. I mean, just because the town's been looking a blind eye to it, doesn't mean that, because you're doing it, it's okay. And it's got to the point where it's out of control, at least in a lot of neighborhoods. Airbnbs or Airbnb or short-term rentals have taken over some of our little neighborhoods. And I think it's terrible because it's no more a community anymore. You don't know who your neighbor is.
If they don't do SDRs, then the long-term, the people that, the 45%, 50% of the people that don't own that property, they're not there on the weekend. The neighborhood's quieter, probably.
Okay, so we're diverging opinions here, which is healthy for the
I mean,
community.
I look at it,
Unhealthy for
what
the
price do you put on your community? This is a small,
But
beautiful
you're
little community
starting
that had
from, you're
nice
starting from
neighborhoods.
the assumption that having an SDR destroys the community, and that's not accurate. As Mark said just a little while ago, and we're reading the comments, half of the comments are the fact that short-term rentals bring positive attributes to the community.
Yeah.
It's not that just a negative. I think the legal issue is an important issue, but if you say you can only have SDRs in certain zones in the town, you're basically gonna kill it.
Well,
No, that's not gonna necessarily kill it, no.
Well, how many residential properties are there?
It has to
in
be.
the-
Don't talk about killing it, nobody's trying to kill it.
No, but what I'm saying is how many residential properties are there in commercial zones?
Every property on Main Street, Pine Hill is residential commercial. Every single property.
Yeah, but I mean,
Every single property, and
now,
90% of them are Airbnbs. Every single property on that Main Street, we all love Pine Hill, right? We just talked about it. Every single property could be a business. Every single one.
no, but that's just a small little strip, and you got this
A
huge
small little
town.
strip, it's an entire hamlet in our town. It's not. It's one of 2 commercial districts in the town. To say it's a small little district is not true. It could be 50% of our financial hub in this economy, and it's not. We rely on Phoenicia. So to discredit Pine Hill, which seems to be a running theme,
No,
I'm sorry,
I'm
I'm
not
getting a little
discrediting.
passionate here.
I'm not discrediting Pine Hill at all.
I do. Did you know that? Yeah.
I'm not discrediting, what I'm saying is the number of SDRs by definition are not in the commercial zones because they're homes. I mean, so I agree that we should figure out a way to move towards a legal definition so that we can have SDRs in all zones.
And I agree with you,
Well, we'll
but
take
to
it.
do that, you're gonna have to change the zoning, because the
Right.
zoning says that you need a special use permit to run an SDR.
But you have to change the laws associated
Well,
with it.
you wanna change the laws to benefit the SDR community so they can operate, and you think that it's gonna develop or overdevelop the town and bring in arts and musical types of things, and it's gonna be a real benefit, but, if the people that live here now and grow up in this town can't afford to rent an apartment or rent a house or buy a home what good is the town? You've tore the town apart. And I look at it this way. I look at the reservoirs. When New York City come up there and sold everybody a bill of goods about buying all of that property and making reservoirs, it's going to be great for the community. Now there's a police department. New York City claims to own the streams all the way to Canada and the rain that comes out of the sky. So you look at this STR thing, you better be very careful and tread lightly, because at what price do you put on your town? So a few can benefit with yards. What price do you put on your town? Do you sell our cute little hamlet to the Airbnb community? Do you sell it and just walk away from it? I mean, you tell me. I mean, you might be making money and you say your grandfather, and I don't know where your property is, but I don't know how anybody is grandfathered in unless you own a hotel or a motel or a bed and breakfast and owned it before the zoning, or have in a commercial use or multi-use zone.
Well, I think part of what we're all doing here is we're using, from the meth lab to killing it, which I've said a couple times. I think what we need to do, we need to speak in context of working a solution, not using extreme examples to argue.
So in other words, we need to reach a balance.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of that, and I apologize to the group for that. I'm trying to draw analogies and give examples, and I think we all are trying to do that, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
I think we just need to be careful of when we use our words to not have them be in extreme position, because in the end, we want to have something that works for everybody.
We will need to reach a balance.
I think in the end, what we have to do is have something that works for the whole community,
Right.
and not part of the community.
Right.
And I think that's where some of these arguments with the SDRs and people that own them, that's where we kind of butt heads, because it seems that the SDR community doesn't really care about, in my opinion, care about the neighborhood. What they care about is renting their places out, so somebody else will pay for it, and they don't have to worry about their taxes because the money's there, and, you know, they can afford to do that. But at the expense of the neighbors, and I'm not saying all of them are bad, because some of them, you know, if the zone is spread out so much where the houses aren't clogged together, it doesn't affect the neighborhood so much. With little children growing up in a house, the next door neighbor, they don't know who they are. Every day there's somebody different. Every week there's somebody different. You know, I mean, you tell me if that's good for a family. I don't see it.
Well, you know, this is a really good conversation, and, you know, a couple of things that Hank said, the idea that, you know, what prices to a community so that only a few could benefit, that's a good point, and then what you said later, about, you know, we need something that works for the whole community.
It's more than a few benefit. It's more than a few.
I know.
Could be.
And, you know, it's Ralph, right? You know, I think Ralph made an important point once we get to the point of thinking, how do we want to make this better for everyone? You know, he had those three groupings I heard: absentee owner, a home that's more often STR than occupied, and a home that's occasionally STR. And, you know, I think that, because I heard there's an undercurrent in some of the comments, I think, Hank, you just alluded to it, well, this is just driven by greed, some people want to make a quick buck. Maybe that's true for the absentee owner, but I don't think it's true for the person who occasionally does an STR. I think they need the money. I don't like the amount of taxes I'm paying. I'm staring right into the camera for being in Shandaken. Not by any means do I like the amount of taxes I have to pay. And for the ones that's more often than occupied, but yeah, maybe the absentee owner driven purely a speculative business venture, but there are people here, when you read these comments, who need this money coming in because they love being here, they want to be here.
No, I believe exactly what you said.
Okay.
If you go back to reading the comments are on the 300 and something returns you got on the survey. And I don't think that survey shows a broad brush of what the whole community
It's the
thinks.
best information we got.
Well, it's the best information you got based on who you gave it to and how it
It was
went out.
given to everybody. It was
No,
on
no,
your
you didn't
account,
give
it
it
was on the
to me.
website.
I didn't even know how to get it. I didn't know how to get it. Nobody mailed me anything. I didn't get an email. The only way I got it was the STR community in my neighborhood was emailing everybody to tell them to fill out the survey. And that's how I found out about the survey.
Well, that's
And then I
good.
went
Well, that's
online and got it.
legitimate. That's legitimate.
Yeah, but
It's a community driven.
nobody that I knew that lived here full-time knew anything about the survey. You could talk to people even, you know, tomorrow, and I'm sure that every person you talk to isn't going to say, oh, I knew about the survey, I just didn't want to fill it out. It's not true.
Did you see their post office?
I didn't know.
But it's a statistically representative
people
sample, I
don't
think we
believe
can
in
argue. We got enough responses to say that it probably gives us a fair shadowing of what the
I
feeling is
disagree,
out there.
Because I think it's a slanted survey.
Well, we talked,
And 50%,
And I said that
50% of the comments said it's slanted one way, the other 50% said it's slanted
I
the
felt that
other.
was pretty.
So James felt it was slanted.
That's
the other
why
way.
I think that this thing should go out for a referendum vote by all the people in the town of Shandaken that live here, and see how they feel about.
Before we get there.
And that's mechanism for how we would go
That's a
forward.
long way.
I mean, how do you come up with how everybody's gonna feel? They're not gonna get an opportunity to vote on it. They're not gonna get an opportunity to say anything unless there's a public hearing.
Maybe that's the insight that we need.
Well, there's gonna be public hearings after we come up with a proposal, there's gonna be public hearings on it. And the idea is, the reason there's public hearings is that so if they need to be modified based on feedback from the public hearing, they will be. So it's a process that we're working on. I wanna make a point, I was speaking to a host the other day, he said, my family has been in the Catskills for 200 years. You know, he goes way back, you know, whether it's 150, you know, the point was, he's been here for dozens and decades and decades. And he owns a property, he Airbnbs it, and he lives here during the summer, and he lives elsewhere during the rest of the time. And so, I think you can't stereotype that people who own properties here part-time are out to make a quick buck, or that they don't need the money, or things like that. A lot of people are able to own a second home, which is very important for them, and come and make a contribution to the community. They come here for that. So you're treading on a slippery slope if you say, okay, if you're out of town, you're out of luck, you know. I think we need to be careful of that. I think if we focus,
What do you mean?